When I first interviewed Kevin on my Shaping Fire podcast, he said with zero shame that he has been a trafficker all his life. I thought that was so cool. Not only do I not hear many people use the word trafficker, but to see someone who stepped into it and owned it and was proud of it and rode prohibition all the way to legalization and is now a leader in his community. I'm like, damn straight. These are the kinds of things that make a hero to me. He has deep roots in both Oakland and in Humboldt County. He is prohibition era turned licensed, and he's savvy and successful in both. He's created the most important genetics hub in the United States in Humboldt County at his nursery, Wonderland Nursery. Not only is he wildly successful himself, but he's become a leader in that community. You know, it's one thing to be a producer and sell your product and just generally be a good person. But then to take that and to become a leader in your community, band people together, work with policy changes, work with the laws, and then go and mentor new entrepreneurs, new breeders who are coming up, and to fill the vacuum that he's created behind him so that there's new folks. That kind of leadership is rare in our industry for somebody who's not just trying to chase dollars. He's an all-around good guy, and I consider it a privilege to be his friend. I'm honored to present Kevin Jodrey.
Always brutal to follow such a good intro. Thank you so much for having me here. I was excited. I follow what you guys do, and it's awesome that you as a community get together and work on cannabis and cultural stuff and community. It's I would say a losing element in our society, where really we're becoming a very small minority of people who are really career cultivators, spiritual cultivators. So thank you so much for letting me come here. My conversations typically aren't on that though. Typically people bring me in to talk about a direction, a thing. My success is in survival. I've successfully been in cannabis since I was 12 years old. And I've had this unbelievably long, storied life of cannabis, but here we're at this very different time period where all of a sudden cannabis is no longer cannabis. Cannabis became business. Cannabis is the culture, and we have the product, but the product is a business. And this is this discussion that I'm going to have tonight. Is we're going to talk about terpenes in a little different manner, because you've had Ethan Russo speak to you, who is what I consider the state-of-the-art of the subject right now. Then you had Ben Alexander here, who's a brilliant young man who is very intelligent in plant-derived terps. So I'm not a scientist. That's not my direction. My direction primarily is to assist people with genetic packaging, meaning I put you into the right varietals so that your farm, your business succeeds. My interpretation of the business is what's accurate. I have a tremendous number of people I deal with that are brilliant scientists and brilliant people. That's what they do. So if people get confused, they want to ask me about how to split the atom. That's not what I do. I can tell you how to sell the atom, and I can tell you where to find the atom, and I can tell you how to use the atom. And so that's what this conversation is going to be really about in a second. Is the thing about terpenes is that we're all caught up in this, but I don't think really anybody has a clue what they're talking about at all. And I look at this because I measure it off of marketability, I measure it off of your money. It became a business. We're not talking about in a friendly conversation, hey, who's got the terpene pot? It's not. It's, is your cannabis selling? And people have this huge misconception of how terpenes interrelate with that fact. And I think that that had to be more important than how do we breed terpene pot? Because you got a lot of terpene pot existing. No one in here has to breed a damn thing if you didn't want to. There's so much genetic material available right now that if you just went into it and took a look, you say, hey, I have enough to cover all my markets. Now the question is, how do we optimize it for what you do? And so this conversation is going to start with me being a kid, breaking up bales of land-raised cannabis. So when I was a kid on the East Coast, I was involved in a criminal family that was large. This was organized chronic traffickers. And as a young guy, I got to access all this bulk cannabis coming in from the ships. And what it did was it allowed me to get, I want to say, a reference point of what cannabis was from its original origin. So it would come from these countries, and this was all pretty documented, meaning that it was organized distribution, organized delivery. And so throughout the course of the year, the loads would come in, and we would break these up and then bale them and move them out. And so you would start to know, hey, this was Colombian and Panamanian, and this was Thai, and this was stuff from Afghan land. Well, we grew out some of those Afghani seeds one year, maybe 79, some of those like 12. Because I put a case in 83 and did time. So in 79, we grew up those Afghani seeds in my grandmother's yard, and she had a stunning organic garden, and so we were able to put the seeds into this beautiful, fertile New England soil, and we finished it out. And I remember smoking it, and I remember being so caught up with how rich it was, but how different it was. Because at that was the first pot we grew. This is going back to, the 70s. And so I couldn't believe what those seeds had translated into. They were definitely Afghani seeds because we took them out of the flowers from the bales. But we grew them in Rhode Island. And all of a sudden I'm smoking the progeny from pounds that we're dealing with, and I know it's the same thing, and I can taste the similarities, but there was something missing and something added. And so I just remembered this. I have a good mind for this. This is just something that makes me strong in what I do. I categorize stuff mentally. It drives people nuts. But so I remember these things. So I go forward, and we're baling weed for years. And then I go into the military because I got in trouble and got locked up. And when I went into the military, this was during the height of the drug war. I was a salvage diver, and I used to get dropped out of helicopters onto boats filled with billions of dollars of drugs in the Pacific. And we would dive on the vessels. And I started to be back on the ships with all the land-raised pot again. And I started to see and smell all this. And I started to categorize it, and I started to see the cannabis that was being produced in California, because this would have been the mid-'80s. And I started to see California cannabis, and I started to see all these profiles and flavonoid profiles and tastes and tones. And at that time, good cannabis was good cannabis, and it came in a billion arrays. But it was all classified basically as good, kind, dank, choice, whatever. It didn't make a difference. It was a good pot, it was a good pot. And you started to see this. But when I got into California, up into NorCal, that would have been, mid-'80s, later 80s, I started to really see flavonoids come in. I said, oh my God, everything tastes the same. It was because back guano was used. And so we started to, so all of a sudden, back guano changed the entire tone of all California cannabis. All tasted like guano. So people believe that cannabis tastes like guano. People believe that cannabis tastes like Afghanistan. They believe people taste like Rhode Island. What I started to see was the impact of the inputs on your cannabis itself. So I started doing all this consulting in Humboldt. It was a legal consulting, but it was the only way you can see any quantity is to be able to really work with a lot of these massive operations. Those massive operations let me run tremendous numbers of varieties of strains within their operations. And I would then be able to put any type of variety I wanted in any one of these operations. And by changing an input, I would change how we perceive that strain to be. And so what we're getting down to is that when you're talking about a profile of terpenes, every input influences it. So when someone says to you, I have a terpene profile, I was asking, well, what? Not the cannabis, because the inputs you're not able to separate from. And so it's such a big deal that when I'm doing something like the Emerald Cup as a judge, where I judge the Emerald Cup, I get 1,000 samples, I take a pen and I note things that taste exceptionally similar. And I keep track of those samples. And at the end of the cup, I go back, and they're usually from the same compost suppliers. And so what we found was the compost suppliers out of Sonoma using the grape waste had a much higher residual sugar load, which brought up the flavonoid profile in the cannabis. Terpinator, things like this, they drive these numbers up. You get a higher overall number. Does that necessarily mean it's better? And when Ben and I had a discussion, we were in Hollywood like a couple months ago, I brought a piece of paper to show him, and it was a terp profile of a strawberry banana cup that I have. And it came out in California, seems like about 5% is tops. Oregon goes up to 15, but we must quantify differently because Oregon's pot isn't 3 times danker than California. So we're going to get the numbers right. But the bottom line is, we're going to use some California numbers because we use them at the lab. So 5 is considered a really hot strain, terp the limit. I got a 2.5 strawberry that's half of this number that if you looked at terp profiles, you would have thrown it away. But the problem is it sells for $4,000 a pound because it makes an exceptionally unique concentrate. So I showed it to Ben and Sam because we laugh because terp people say that has no value, but it's a $4,000 pound, as many pounds as I can produce. So would you like to have a $4,000 pound? See, that's what the point of this is that all the years of me working with these jobs, and I got to work with so many people, I got to work with so many projects, and I had so many illegal projects running that I had to learn how to use a computer so I could put them on spreadsheets because I wouldn't have any way to keep track of all this shit. But what it did was it let me start to see what was the impact of any flavor on the cannabis and what was the impact on the environment. Then I started to take a look a little deeper and I started going, you know what? This strain was killer, but it was grown and produced and sifted. Sifted's the key word under metal halide. And this particular cutting was sifted under HPS. That means that whoever grew it and whoever found it, they found something that was developed in a specific environment, under a specific nutrient, in a specific environmental situation. And all of those things contribute radically to how you perceive terpenes. It has a huge impact to the point where it's so big that I don't think people even see it. It's so big. They just look at this is this and this is my list and look at my numbers are big. But the problem is you're looking at terps and you're looking at 40 maybe. I think there's like 240 in cannabis. Ben has a lab in Illinois. From the Ben that came in, he has a lab in Illinois that he can access, and we're going to start sending all these varieties to this lab because we want to find out why do I have a $4,000 pound cut. Right now, we only can see a specific amount. It's the missing pieces that matter. So we can take a look and better idea what is this in this situation produced here. It has this particular value. Can we reproduce it someplace else and transfer the value? And see, that's the part that's tough for most people because as cannabis producers, you get things from people and you say, hey, this was awesome for you. But you take it into an environment, and when you put it into your environment, you're a lead grower. So you have exceptional lighting, but cool. And so you have an ability to do some different stuff, but it changes the plant on a chemical level, and it reflects in its terpene profile. We choose those plants and we put it into an HPS room, and all of a sudden all the monoterps flare right off because it wasn't in a hot room when you chose it. And so the problem that people have is it's such an understanding of I'm just producing pot because for most people they're really not dealers. When people ask me what I do, I'm a drug dealer who happens to love growing pot his whole life. But I'm a drug dealer who happens to love genetics. But I'm a drug dealer who owns dispensaries. But I'm a drug dealer because I'm selling drugs. Or otherwise, I'm not in business. So we can call pot whatever you want. You can call it tomatoes. But fundamentally, it's a drug. And it's experience that they want. So you have to take a look at your market. We had this discussion with someone the other day. I said, listen, you got to understand that if I'm in a AAA market, which is visual, it's going to always be a monoterpene market because people who buy visual pot don't smoke it in consumptive forms. It's little tiny pieces. So they can put all the heat on it in one time and get all the monos and sesquiterpenes and go, it's complete. But if that AAA visual piece with that base goes into someone who smokes in joint form, by the second hit, all the monoterps are flared off because of the heat that moves through the joint. So I was trying to tell them, like, if you're putting into a pre-roll market, it's a sesquiterpene market, and if you're going into this market, it's a mono market, and you have to see it that way, because they don't care about the flavor as much as they care about the nose and the visual. Joint smokers want it in the mouth, and you have to take a look and say, well then, what lines work with that? And we take stuff like, right now, the best example I would think of is the old Urkel cutting, because the old Urkel cutting is really a descendant of the Garberville Purple Kush. Purple Kush, to Mendo Urkel, whatever you want to call it, into every other modern hot strain right now, where the Girl Scout cookie, the Axca's cherry pie, all of that is through that Urkel. Why is that? All of those strains are primarily sold to people who smoke in form. And it's because of the way that that plant has an ability to hold a sesquiterpene that doesn't burn off, but releases this pleasurable flavor in your mouth the whole time. And so for people who are in the pre-roll market, you need to look into those directions. And if you're not, you need to look in the other direction. And I think that most individuals really aren't aware of their impact of what they're doing to their line. Just like I use the example of Royal Kush. So I have a very specific Royal Kush cutting. Royal Kush was a line created in Humboldt by a man named Mandelbrot. So Mandelbrot, brilliant breeder, he passed away about 1.5 years, 2 years ago from a sudden heart attack, like 37 years old. So Brot passes away. But he does this breeding project for Royal Kush, but he does the essay on 3,000 plants on the coast. So his search was of 3,000 progeny. He puts out 3,000, and he does them in Albion on the Mendo coast, and he selects this one incredible cutting. So I hold this cutting. He gives it to me, I hold it, we use it to propagate, we sell it as a cutting. And it's the basis of every Royal Kush plant now, because Mendo got busted, I kept that cut and hid it, and when he came back into the world, I gave it back to him, and the whole line continued. It's a top 5 in the EC, where every time it's entered in the Emerald Cup, anything it touches is a top 5, because it's got such a unique terpene signature. So we go, God, this is incredible. And it's got such a resistance, and it's got all these traits that are phenomenal. So we're just in love with this freaking thing. Well, indoor, same thing, it's killing it. Well, I transferred into Ken Pond, a hotter, drier environment. And lo and behold, my stunning Royal Kush is pretty good, because it had been sifted in an environment that was cool. So you are sifting for where you're producing. And so for people that are producing in high mountain, it's exceptionally windy. Those type of situations, you're going to get less production, but those windier varietals, what you have happen is you almost have the liquids, the waxes in the plant, they literally encapsulate some of your monoterps. And so when you see this high circulatory wind flow, you see plants that are in the circumstances, some of those things allow you to have a radically different response to the cannabis. So I take, remember, I own a nursery. So what nurseries allow you to do is nurseries let me put plants in 1,000 gardens across the state. So I look at cannabis different than most people, because I look at it in $150 to $200 million a year range of production. Now, I'm not making that money, but I got my fingers on that production number. And so that lets me see what really happens, and it lets me see the pulses of these things. And it's crucial, because otherwise how are we going to know? And so right now I've been really accurate with it, but it's little things like the Royal Kush, the wrong circumstance. And so they were able to do well with it, but not to the degree they would have if we put it back into its cooler environment. We would have run it indoor. We have to be careful with light depth strains. So when I sift for light depth is where you're going to go through an artificially high temperature and humidity, to where when you top that shit, it spikes. And anybody that's got, state-of-the-art greenhouses, you got $500,000 in a greenhouse, this isn't for you. But if you're not that guy, you're going to have spikes of humidity and temperature, and you need to make sure that the varieties that you're using primarily for depth serve for your purposes. So you got to remember that almost every variety that you mess around with was sifted for indoor work. So all the seed lines I worked with, all under HPS. So that's what I'm saying, is I know the impact of what I did, because when I transfer that plant from HPS into other light, I get a radically different morphology. The plant changes shape dramatically. If I sift for outdoor only, it precludes the indoor market. Every now and then strains will touch. That means that it works in both directions. But sometimes it doesn't. And that's just the way it is. And so for you, if you're a cannabis producer and you say, listen, you want to make sure that you're sifting stock that works in your specific circumstance, using the foods that you're using, because that's your production methodology. It will influence what you're choosing, but you find what works for you in that specific. And if you're not good at this part, you go get people that run dispensaries, successful ones, and you ask them, is this shit going to sell? Straight up, is it going to sell? Just give me, it's quick. No. Yeah, I'll buy it once, but never again. You need those answers. And the next part of this is really, now that you understand, so we're clear on it, the inputs that are coming into this are so big that I don't think anybody has any idea really what terpene profile that plant has, period. You've grown that goddamn thing in space, you might know. Well, you're not. And all I see is these numbers. And so, when Ethan brought that, I still have the O'Shaughnessy. I still got the original paper. But when that stuff popped, I went right over to the university and said, hey, I have a good relationship with the University in California. And I said, hey, send me over to your science department. I want to talk to your professors. And I said, can we map by terpenes? Because I was going to try to find a fingerprint so we could start figuring out strains. Now we use phylums. But I was trying to figure out a way to quantify what's what and what's not what. Because when you do what I do and sift through so many varieties, you know they're all related. You know they're touching, but how? So you need tools to do this look. And so when I started to really take a look at terpenes in general, is you have to take a look and say, okay, do I want to become an encyclopedia of terpenes? I think there's 42,000. No, I don't want to become an encyclopedia of cannabinoids either. You know which ones I like? The ones that get me high. The other ones don't matter. And we're talking about the individual decision. And what happens is everybody's trying to become so unbelievably intelligent that they forget that is not what the buyer wants. They're not looking for that information. They want a product that simply works. You sell it to Americans, for Christ's sakes. So I'm telling you, you fuck this up, boy, you're excellent. You mess this one up, you're a bad time. So what you want to do is just make it simple for yourself. And so what I did was, I simplify these things, but I try not to dumb them down, right? My skill set is in what I do. I don't have to be a molecular biologist. I just have to know one. I have to ask them, explain to me the fundamentals so that I don't make mistakes at that level. So what I did is I said, let's take a look at cannabis and simplify it. And so I broke it up into 4 basic categories. I broke it up into fuels and earths and fruits and florals. Because to me as a distributor, someone who's been pushing weed for years, that basically covers the spectrum. The way labs kind of break it up is basically like myrcene, carotene, limonene, pinene, and what's the other one that goes along with little that gives us a fire, right? But the problem is that's based off of perfume and essential oil tech. So burn that shit and show me one essay that says what happened when you burned it. I don't think there is any. So therefore, you're using data that isn't accurate, and you're pretending like it is, and you're running wild like you're a friggin' terpene genius, and I'm like, look, it's pinene dominant, but not in your perception, which means there must be a precursor terp somewhere that's affecting it. Something's either increasing or decreasing this thing. We're not seeing any of this crap. So I broke it up into 4 divisions to make it easy for myself. Lo and behold, I created a competition and used those 4 divisions. The next thing I know, I got a guy named John Abrams, who's a UCLA brilliant professor, but he challenges my assertion. He goes, what made you do that? I said, it makes sense to me because I'm a distributor. It's easy. And he goes, you're not right. And I said, well then disprove it, because I don't have to prove I'm right here. I'm telling you straight up, it breaks up into 4 categories. So he goes back to UCLA with a fire in his ass to go prove me wrong, but what happened was, I was right. And notice, this all papers, you can dig all this up. So if you went on to the guy in GA, you could pull all this papers. It was like a 30 or 40 page piece he did on it. He did a 6-hour medical conference in Vegas on this topic, because it was the first time they had enough samples put together that let them look at terpene profiles, and using graphing technology. It was pretty neat. I got to see really cool graphing technology that let them see visual pictures to see relationships and how they connect. And so he showed me this incredible interrelationship. He said, basically, Kev, it's pinene and limonene, which is fuels, earth subset, fruit, floral subset. And so he goes, you were completely right in your simplified breakdown. And so the point of it isn't to say that I'm so damn smart. It's that if I could simplify 42,000 into 4, then maybe you can too. And it makes it kind of easy, because we can take a look at those markets now and say, fuel market, fruit market, floral market, earth market. Where do those markets exist? And where is my distribution within those markets? And so I know that if I'm in certain situations, I know that it's going to have to be in like a floral, which is Blue Dream in this area. And someone says, yeah, the Blue Dream is a fruit. Which one? Which Blue Dream? There's like 9 or 10 different ones. I have 2 of them. One of them would quantify under a fruit flavor, and one would go under a floral, because it goes more under the haze. So which one? You have to be almost individual, because we can't go by on a line. And even if you went from a specific cutting, you would have it, you're going to get a base, but it'll alter as you move it. And this stuff is so crucial, because what it does, it allows you to pick things for your farm that make you money. So when I produce BHO, it sells at 120 bucks a gram, because that's the one I'm growing. And that's important, and that's because that's how you hunt it. You're like, holy shit, because otherwise we're going to get wiped out. So I look for specific things, and we do tests, and we find out that's the one that people like. Then I can do anything I want, any test I want on it, because it's not going to give me the goddamn picture. It's going to give me a snapshot through a keyhole. I'm going to say, wow, Vimio's 2 people, and he's got a fish shirt on. No, it's a whole room full of people. So my perception is so inaccurate that it completely negates my choices, because I'm not making choices. I'm just doing something that doesn't make any sense. And for me, it's crucial that you go about this. You have to pick the right varietals for the application for your purposes. And so I know what I do for my own situation where I break up those 4 categories and I take a look at the subsets and I say, hey, how much of a distribution does my farm have to have in these respective areas? Where do people like earths? That's a sedative. And where are you seeing fruits? Happy, uplifted people. And that's typically going into cartridges now, because it's going into women, older people, changing. Where's the gas? Anybody that has opiate or pain. Because opiate addiction in America is out of control. And for all the years that I've been running businesses, I've asked, I don't know, 5,000 people, why are you buying pot? Why are you buying kush? I got an opiate problem. And I said, holy Christ, everybody's got an opiate problem. And so whatever happens with opiates, because I don't do the damn things, whatever happens with opiates, certain cannabis varietals allow it to really be exceptionally effective and then replace it. And so if you're in California, everybody's drugged out of their mind, you better sell fuel, because no one is going to get any effect on a fruit. But how do you use the fruit to drive a sale? Because what's the most addictive of terps? Citrus terps. And so and then this is just straight up, the tobacco company figured this one out for you. But what's the point of that? I don't want to addict you, but I want you to friggin' want to buy it twice, right? So just call it what it is. I don't want you to buy it once, I want to buy it twice. I want you to buy it till it's gone. I want you to chase the state of California to buy all of that extract. I want the whole state to empty out. Because people thought, holy Christ, and it all went away. That's not a bad thing. So how do we do that? We look for these things that work for us, and we start to be intelligent about where's our market. So if you're going to go into the pen market, then those bright terpenes, those things go that direction. But if you're going to go into pre-rolls, then it has to be earths and gases primarily, because those things are going to hold the flavor through the end of it. If we want to throw a fruit onto a gas, we have to breed it in. And then we can combine it and start to have it in varietals. You can actually mix cannabis in a container and put it in the joint, and no one would ever know the difference. Because I do it with concentrates all the time, where I blend concentrates and give it to you and it's a better product. Because I said, listen, I'm going to give you the delivery of the citrus, but I'm going to lay this one in here, and let me figure out the ratios. And I just weigh it out so I can kind of recreate it again, and I just make the shit. Because what are people doing for wine? They've been blending wine for 10,000 years. So there's no difference. It's combining it so that you can figure out, okay, I got you. People love the citrus, but they burn out quickly because they don't get high long enough. So what am I going to do? I can give them some gas with it. So I give them some gas with some citrus, and now they're stacked. And that's something you need to be aware of, but it's really only going to move within these 4 lines. And so you're going to have billion subsets with each one, so earth and every little thing below earth. But basically, you're going to go earthy. And in a single word, you can describe it. I'm in the water, I'm wet. I don't need to talk anything else. I don't care if I'm in the Aegean Sea or I'm in the South China Sea. So I'm in the water. And so it makes it kind of easy in that form, and that's important for you, because I think as the cultivators, everybody I talk to, they're so confused as to really what it is that they're doing. And I'm like, wait a second. What you have to do is identify your production capacity and identify where you're at, and start to find varietals that work for you using your production methodology. And a lot of that is getting a lot of clones from a lot of people and running all of them. And you just run all of them. So I might run 50, 60 different strains every year, like a clock through time. Minimum. Yeah, I mean, I'm running all year round, but outdoor. I'm putting them outside too, so I can see them in form and say, oh, wow, I didn't expect you to be so good outside. We had no idea. Then we take the plant, put it inside, and we go, holy Christ, you're terrible. Wow. And it was just like when I used to do with indoor. I used to sift for indoor so heavy that when I started transferring it to outside, I made this terrible mistake because I was on a 12-12 trigger. And so I'm pushing my plants artificially late because I don't have a 14-5 switch, I have a 12 switch. And it screws you. Same thing. It also has characteristics that work for that indoor HPS. You know, at that time it was all hydroponics. Once we shifted into organic, growing systems, actually decades ago, but when we went into organic systems, it was starting to try to understand what is the input on the organic components to your cannabis. And to me, guano was something that was supernatural. I don't think anything ever tasted as good as guano. But it's so environmentally destructive to mine it that I don't use it. I just try to stay away from this shit. I realized that we're doing more damage growing pot. I mean, we're environmentally concerned, but Christ, we're mining the earth dry behind us. And so, guano doesn't work. And so what do we work with? We work with some of the fish products because they bring some nice flavors in. I noticed that when I was in Hawaii, cannabis that was grown with pig shit, I thought it was the soil. Because I'm in Hawaii, I'm growing, I'm smoking, I'm going, okay, this is Molokai weed. Then I went back to Humboldt County, and my friend had a pig farm, and he had grown using that material up in the hills. And it was the same profile, and I said, boom, it wasn't the Molokai soil, it was the pig shit that masked it. So, like I said, I keep track of all this crap, because I'm trying to understand, what am I really looking at? And what do I try to do? And that's why when you take a look at a lot of the salt-based feeds, they all distinctly put a flavor on it. So Cutting Edge puts a flavor on it, Advanced Nutrients puts a flavor on it, GH puts a flavor on it. And if you're growing with those methodologies, and you have somebody who's actually active with this shit, they can puff it and they can start to tell you which one you're using. Because they all have a little bit different bite, and why is that? Because the chelates are different, and the mineral mining sources are different. So those little tiny subtleties change the cannabis profile there too. And so this is huge, because you're talking about getting somebody an experience they're going to want to buy twice. And we buy stuff and we go, hey, let's go use all this shit. Let's go make it more, make it more. And the reality of it is, if you wanted the nastiest terp profile that was really the most genuine, you get it none. You do the opposite. Because the plant's using terps as a bioprotectant. So if I want to experience the full range of what I'm supposed to experience, I would have the plant at its worst condition. Period. And ideally, I would even try to mine the biology from where it came from. So just like your stomach biology, you have the stuff in your gut affects how you function. The stuff in the soil changes pickup. So I add specific mycorrhizae to drive silicate uptakes. Well, that changes the quality of the plant, but I'm sure it has a subtle change in tone. So your microorganisms affect this also. And so every single input has this incredible impact on what you're doing with cannabis. And I think that at one time, I used to see people not grow homogeneous pot. So I see a lot of homogeneous pot now. And I'm not trying to knock Terpinator, but you would up and pour that shit in my bag. it's because all it's doing is I call it's blandification. So all I get is I get a fat number on a chart, but tell me what strain you grew after you grew that crap. You can't even tell. There's no separation. And if I'm having a problem determining what I'm doing, tell me that's not going to affect the effect too. I have to be nullifying all these subtle effects. And so you got to remember, the cannabis that we're messing with is not land-raised. Even the land-raised stuff that I was getting isn't really land-raised. It's coming from land-raised areas. But if a human being put his hand on it, that shit's cultivated right. So it's not land-raised. It's just that it's from land-raised pockets. So it lets us kind of know, hey, this is pretty real in its genome form. But other than that, we don't have any idea what these things are like. And people who did a good job, or people who said, hey, listen, I'm going to start to work with what I have here. And so for me, I smoke some cannabis that's done with ferments that's phenomenal, because it's really unique. And depending on what they're fermenting and what they're driving it through, you start to get these flavonoid profiles that are just really, really bright and beautifully long-lasting in the mouth itself. And that's one of the experiences you can't get around. It leaves a flavor. That's why the Skittle is so unbelievable. The Skittle is really a weak, inbred knockoff of the sherbet. Genetically, it is. It is. But it has the single most unique flavor you've experienced in your life. It's like you stuck your finger right in the thing of Tang. When I was a kid, I was poor. And so we had Tang, And so you'd stick your fingers. You thought you wanted to be an astronaut too. So you'd stick your finger in the astronaut thing. And when I put it in my mouth, when I mess with the Skittle, it's the exact same experience. And the Skittle right now probably goes to like 32, 33 on the market as a unit. So right now in California, $1,000 is if you can sell it for $1,000, you'd be jumping up and down. Tell me you sold it. The Skittle at times, that strawberry banana at 4. But you wouldn't know by the terp test, you wouldn't know by the potency. I mean, the numbers on the strawberry banana are good, but same thing. People always come to me with the sheets. Look at the sheet, look at the sheet. I'm just like, Christ, who's the lab operator? Oh, somebody I know, my buddy's machine. So none of this is even accurate. So half the crap you're looking at, half the labs you're using, I don't even knock on the labs, but I'm like, these guys aren't qualified. And so I know that I'm not qualified either. My mom's a brilliant scientist. When I have a question about who I'm not, I ask her. You're not a scientist. So she doesn't know. Straight up. She that's not my forte, but my forte is an interpretation. And it's understanding how to take this information and how to apply it. And that's what I realized needed to happen, because anybody I talk to, I'm like, you aware that the cup you're running was sifted for an indoor hydro into HPS and you put it in the greenhouse? And they're like, I don't know what you mean. You're going to find out in a minute. It has to happen. So for all of you, we're all going to get there. We're all in cannabis, and all of us intend to live here for a while. I mean, you know, none of us intend to just go away tomorrow. I'm not going to quietly die off. So my job is to stay mentally active and to make sure I stay on point. And I try to give this information to people I'm around because I present them with genetic packages of, hey, these things are good in these circumstances, and here I can give you a sample of it. We produced it using this methodology. So I can kind of give you the list of the inputs I used and what we did and where we did it to get this. And then I know where you are. So for me, because of all the years of criminality, it allowed me to have a different type of relationship with most of the guys or women I deal with, because they inherently trust me because they know I'm probably dirtier than you were. So there's no way I'm going to ratchet out. And that's the truth. And what it did was it allowed me really to have an honest conversation with the cultivators. Because nobody's talking to anybody directly. And I'm talking to thousands of people. I'm like, look, what are we doing? And it's trying to figure out how do we get you to be successful. Because the bottom line is I function primarily as a commercial nursery producer. I don't sell clones. I do, but not really. I'm months sold out most of the time. Not to regular people, commercial individuals that are producing millions of dollars each minimum. It's a very specific market I've developed in what I do. And it's because it makes it very simple for me to do what I do. Because I can have this conversation with them quickly. All right, what do I do? And it lets us both work. And then they can give me feedback on how it worked for them accurately. And we can find out, hey, what do we know about this cutting? So that pretty soon we know indoor, outdoor, greenhouse depth, and what lighting system and what feed range, how to do it. And now you can put yourself into situations where you have a market where you want a market that has a fuel citrus, and they tell you this, but you can't get it to come out. You can find one that does. And find someone who's created that situation and say, hey, how can I replicate it? The bottom line is, for all us craft people, if you don't work together sharing this shit when it's so done, they've been saying this for decades, you better get in the boat together, you're going to drown. And getting in the boat together means you work together on these sifting projects. It's very hard to do a population sift by yourself. And most people really aren't qualified to make the decision. What's your qualifications? How many people are you guiding into money? None. Then you're not the right guy. So let's find the right guy. You're the one who ascertains quality on cannabis flowers. Let's get you in here to make this decision and help us out. Are we going the right route? Do you like the profile? Did the feed work? How'd it work out? Would you buy it twice? And you've got to get this info. It's so important. More important than anything else is the data back of, am I going the right direction with what I'm doing? Because I see most cultivators just straight running down the goddamn road into poverty. Because they're not talking and they're not sharing any information because we come from such a private culture. I mean, Christ, when I came out of the closet, it freaked me out. But I didn't have any other option because I had such a clear vision one day of today. I knew where we were going to go. And so I knew that I had to come out of where I was at and enter normal cannabis. And I made that entry. So now I'm not, shit, my Wonderland Nursery is named after, my lawyers can't figure out, I wonder how you didn't land in federal prison. And so I couldn't be any more grateful that I'm still here, you know, and to get to do what I do. But my concerns are for the people around me also, because we all are connected. We're all in the neighborhood with you. I help out all my partners. People trip out because I service other clone ops. And they're like, why do you tech other clone ops? And I said, because they're not really competing with me directly. And I said, the bottom line is, they need to eat too. So I make a decision on weeds and stuff. Like, you gotta kind of see that shit. It's real. And some of this stuff is gonna require multiple farms to kind of work together and say, hey, I did a sift. You know how I do it? I do it with multiple people in multiple states. So I have 4 people I work with, the 4 of us hunt. And I got one dude back there with the deer. My partner Pedro, he helps me hunt cattle because he's got them out. So he may not speak too much, but he's speaking to the reefer. So it allows me to say, hey, this makes sense? Yes. And then I know, because sometimes even I need a confirmation on it, because I'm like, hey, is this going to satisfy the market? Because what's going to happen is emotionally you're going to want it to. And businesses and emotions, and so I rip that shit out all the time. It makes it really clear, is it or is it not? So you get together with groups, and you start to work, and so every year I might get one killer cultivar I find. But I got 3 buddies hunting too. So every year I'm going to get 4 new cultivars that are going to pop up. It lets me stay current constantly. And then I take these things that are red hot and I share them with people who could use the goddamn help. And I don't bust their balls, and I just say, look, this cut's going to make a difference for you because it's been sorted for your application. Just trust me. And then all of a sudden you got somebody else who's survived. You're going to need them. You have no idea who's going to give you a life raft. I'm telling you, man, it's a freak show. And you all know it. And it's going to get worse. And this is how you really function, is marketability. You want to carve out a niche. You need commercial cannabis to own because without it, you have no separation. Commercial swag farmers go big. I'm like, salt farm down, boys. Go big. There has to be a place for craft to be. It has to be. It's just that how will you get people to want to buy it? And it's not going to be an exorbitant price either. That's going to be exceptionally marketed. That's a whole other skill set. This one is, how do I get a fair price for cannabis that's produced in this method? And the only way we're going to be able to do this is to get into varietals that have high velocity. And you start to work those varietals, and everything goes in cycles. I know that with OG, it goes on a multi-year, it goes on a multi-year cycle. And so OG, I hold OGs that are earthy, I hold OGs that are fuely, I hold OGs that are citrus. Because it changes every day in the year. They wanted citrus this year, they wanted gas next year, they wanted earth next year. What's the examples of those? Ghost, SFV, and like the Blood Diamond or Hell's Angel, right? So it lets me use some very specific cuttings that people interpret as gassy, citrusy, or earthy, but all within the OG realm. I make sure I hold them, and then I just know that this market is not a fad. I love 20-year fads. I wish every fad was 20 years. And you just let that stuff run, because you're not going to have, the population will shift within them. So it makes it kind of easy once you start to build up your libraries, once you start to get your terp divisions broken down, once you start to really see what works for you on your farm and is exceptional, you work with it and get it out into the public. But you're just going to get yourself some honest feedback. And I don't think most people really. The wine, California, we got the wine guys come in. So the wine guys always come in and want to tell you that you're stupid. And they do, they're straight up, and they're basically telling you you're undereducated. So I spent the day with this guy. Most of the day I heard I was undereducated. But at the end of the day, he was like, wow, we're none of us qualified to judge pot. I said, exactly. Because cannabis is complex, it's not ethyl alcohol and terps. There's a lot of other shit going on. And so because of that, you have to be able to handle the effect. And so if you can't, when I tell people how much I smoke, and how much I can smoke in a row, and I tell people when I judge a competition how much I'm blowing through in a single sitting there in horror, and they're like, oh. I said, dude, I'll do it again, watch. I'll pick the same one out every single time, watch. Because the bottom line is, you can tell, quality is quality. I'm not trying to make something become something. I'm allowing it to be what it is. I don't add to it. I'm not adding my own flavor to the damn thing. Ooh, it's extra. Can you taste, my favorite one is, can you taste the berry in it? No, but if I hope a little bit more, I might. So it's there. It's going to be there, guys. It's just not there. You just got to admit it. And then it makes it easy on that. And so that's what I want to talk about. You know, we brought in to talk about breeding terps. And I started realizing with all the scientific stuff that's coming with marker-assisted, that our breeding programs are going to change dramatically over time. But primarily when you're working with breeding terpene profiles, it's, I would say, complementary. Complementary profiles. People start putting too much crap together and it all jams up. And you're like, wait a second, I want dissimilar stuff to come together to form a union. I don't want just a bunch of shit dumped in a basket. That's not that attractive in any form. And what are we trying to put together? And the problem you're going to find is that it's never going to be the sexy male that's going to do this. Because I always use me as the example. My son's an international athlete, and my daughter is going to be 6'2". And I'm like, I'm a genetic runt. So what happened? I'm a perfect breeder male. I don't really pass a lot of traits on. it's conversely the other way, then that's what you would want to see is the male stamp those traits. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to do the same thing because people don't understand. It's typically not this simple. You can always go through a population and find outliers, but we're trying to put it together so there's a greater population, so that I don't just find the only one that fit the bill, but I had 40 that fit the goddamn bill, and out of the 40, I got the one that could handle morphologically the loading of the wind, and I got the one that had the trigger, so it finished by the first, and it gets enough wax to keep the monos, and it's got enough secondary bonds to hold in the thing. Oh, that's a good one. But I had to go through a big population to do this. And so in your breeding processes, that's how you have to look at it. Scientific stuff is going to help us tremendously. Phylos is a wonderful tool because it lets us take a look. That's why I love Phylos so much. I'm in love with the technology because it cuts all the bullshit stories out of the room. I bred this. No, you didn't. You stole it from him. I'm sure around. I stole it. And it's just, people are quiet. All of a sudden, there's nobody on the internet anymore rapping about how much crap they created. Because I'm out them. And you know why? Because you're screwing people over like these guys. You're like, this is a good example right here. No, that's a good example. So HBK. Right? This kid's an awesome breeder. So he breeds this strain, and he sells a crop to a dispensary in Sacramento, gives them some stuff. They rename it, and it becomes Green Ribbon. Right? And Green Ribbon becomes this unbelievable strain. They won a Terp Festival thing. So I hold this. I'm the one that holds the cutting of it. So I hold this cup. And so I'm talking Eric, 7 years later I meet Eric. Right? But in the meantime, for 7 years I'm holding this cut. It's been credited to a dispensary in Sacramento as the creators. They bred it, they did it, they were the only people that had it. So I have this. It's in all these different breeding projects. It's all over the place. I meet Eric and we're friends, and one day he says, hey, Phylos my cut that I have of this strain, and it's the same as yours. And I said, oh, it's easy. You got robbed. Because I know where I got it from, and I know you must be the breeder that bred it. And so he got screwed by the dispensary. And so we just renamed Green Ribbon, where we call it Green Ribbon. It's really it's like green candy, green Cracker Jack. But since it's been called Green Ribbon so long, it's just that I made sure his name got attached to it, and we put it out like that. Because the problem with this shit is that how is anybody going to work with you if you're going to steal their shit? How is anybody going to trust you if you're going to jack them for all their crap? And the problem is that's all we got is trust, because that's what the dope game is really about, faith and trust. And so that's why I'm having such a miserable time right now with the new industry, because nobody has any faith and trust. And it has to happen. So you guys like Eric creates this incredible strain, 52 days indoor, 26% on the THC, comes out at 4 something on the Terp. It hits every number you would want, which means it absolutely moves through dispensary markets. Legal markets absorb that shit. But when you smoked it, it was a complex, nasty little beast. So you come back and get it again. But lo and behold, he gets ripped. And so that's the whole thing, is, you know, it's what you use it. And so Phylos is good because it allows you to take a look to see what you're using and find out what's inside this. What's the outliers? We found some weird stuff where we noticed that all the OGs that have super numbers have like a skunk progeny in them. So I know that all my OGs that have way higher numbers than normal, there's like a skunk in those. So somewhere back in the day, something came in and let this happen. But you want to see all this to know, because that might be where the tone is coming from. That's why this one doesn't have it. It's because it's in that piece. If we had known through Phylos what would make things up, it would have made so much. I hunted all the CBDs down initially. I mean, we chased all the CBDs shit 9 years ago. I was on a CBD hunt for a while because it was what was needed. But Phylos would have made it so much easier because it would have let me understand better what I was looking at, and I would have been able to see better, hey, in the Pakistani genetic lines is where all the CBDs live. And so when I started getting material from Pakistan, it started letting me see this. And it started letting me see what was coming from Pakistan directly, and it started going, whoa, that's where all these numbers and ratios are coming from. We're not looking at the right population. We say it doesn't exist. It exists fine right here. Same with your Terps, and same with all your stuff. You just got to go into the work. But what most people are doing is lazy work. They're not doing population sifts. Hey, I put 10 seeds out, and you should take those 10 seeds, and you should cross the damn things and get 1,000 seeds out of that and go through that population. Then you find an outlier that works for you. And people go, that's a lot of work. And I said, well, unemployment line's a lot of work too. Understand it. Understand what's going to happen. If you're going to have to put a level of work into getting your genetic package together, because ultimately, what does the person interface with you? That product. That's all they know is that. They don't give a shit about everything else. And so if your market's through dispensaries where they're numbers only, like I got a 5-star service in the Bay Area that I use to work with friends of mine. But what I do is I feed new cuttings constantly because I know what a 5-star line should look like. And so he just comes up and he lets me feed him nonstop with every single new thing I'm playing with. After I run it, I go, nasty, 5-star. And so we run it through him. So it just lets us see what it looks like because he produces everything indoor organically and I'm an outdoor guy. So his work lets me see my beautiful cuttings in a different format. And sometimes they're as awesome and sometimes they're better. And you go, damn, that was really for an indoor sift. And so you have to be able to get you some partners, get you some people from some different markets, take a look and see what's really moving. You got dispensary people. I walk into a dispensary, it's got 400 selections. I go, Fuelian, something tasty. Boom. And I go, and they go, oh, these are the ones that are flying out the door. And they go, I'm not asking for, I want terpene, I want asamine, who's asking for that crap? I want a banana. They use words. And so you start to change it. I can hear, on the Terp chart, this one says it, but it doesn't taste like a damn bit of banana. But it makes you feel good, it's there. But this one seems to have much less, almost none, but the banana flavor is unbelievably strong. So you have to have the ability to have that conversation so that the seller of the pot can say, I want something banana-y. They don't look at the chart, they go, hey, this one's really pretty banana-y. Don't worry about it. And that's really how the buy goes down. People know, I'm like, whoa, there's such a disconnect on how sales are made. And I was like, wait a second, you can sell the product, you get the people to understand, and you present them in these arrays, and you do your work. And that really puts you in a much better position. It's what lets me compete with much more better. I'm the only guy I know that doesn't have an investor that's at my level. And it's because my guy, we're working nonstop to fight this little game right here where I think I'm better than you at this. I'll prove it. And it's about what's quality. What's the basis of a good experience in these different directions? So that this way people can experience what you want to give them, and you're able to really get the money back. And that's where our pieces are. So I think we're running out of time.
Time for some questions.
Yeah, let's put some questions out.
Right on.
You got time for it.
Sales volume when you have your fingers on, how would you say it breaks out across the 4 categories?
Right now, earths are always low, but they're a specific group. Florals fluctuate depending on what regions you're in. Fruits are pretty strong because of the extract market, and if you're in Cali, fuel's king. So if I was in Seattle, I'd go and take a look and say, what are people buying? What's everybody smoking? And I would ask you, what y'all smoking? What do you smoke? And I start to take a look and say, well, yeah, Blue Dream's killing it here. So you guys still like ethereal kind of cannabis. You like a little more upwardly lifted. You like more introspective, which would be more of those florals. So I would start to go into those ranges. But in California, holy shit, boy, it's so opiate based. I'm telling you, people don't ever, like, we got a drug problem in America, it's supernatural, this one. The number of people in California that have some opiate based kind of thing going on is so huge that I don't think gas will ever go away. Yeah, well, it's crazy. And I asked that. This is 1,000 people being asked over the counter.
How about seasonal? Do you find it changing with seasons? And maybe not so much in California because it's sunny.
No,
Washington.
Well, we have radical changes too. We got radical changes too, because you got to remember the last couple of years in Cali, Cali's on about a 26-year cycle. So every 26 years you see this water cycle kind of roll through, right? So the last 10 years you've been on this incredibly excessively hot, dry, and then we're back up to 120 inches of rain now. So now we're going back into the wet cycle. Same thing, the cannabis varieties that were chosen for those situations, when the temperature changes or it gets conversely moister, change in tone. And that's where indoor is strong, because they can keep the damn thing the same all the time, but they don't ever get the waxes high enough. And so what you get is you'll never get a sesquiterpene bud out of an indoor that touches an outdoor. Monoterpene, yes, because I can protect that, and I can get a higher percentage of cannabinoids in a specific indoor because I can control the environment so much. I can get my humidity and I have control through my plant. So I can get it down to like 14%. Hold it. You want to see the resin from the plant there. But that's a very specific situation where, you know what? It doesn't produce the waxes, the hold, and the sesquiterpene one at the end isn't the same.
How about the market, though? Does the market shift with the seasons? Like what people want to smoke in summer versus what they want to smoke in the fall?
Typically, no. I mean, typically, I would say not the average smoker, but if you were at a store and it was in the summer from June to September, you'd see 90 days of tourist sales. But then as soon as September 1 hits, tell me everybody's coming to tourists back to work. So all back to work. Now it's Seattle smokers. So Humboldt, we're going to experience this in a minute. And as a matter of fact, what I did is I just created an entire bed, I grew out an entire bed of low potency varietals that's about a 10.5. But it's unbelievably rich in the mouth and full bodied. And I said, hey, listen, with all the tourist market that's coming in, the stuff that I'm smoking is crippling people and I make them sick. And I'm just like, well, for me, that's normal. And I mean, it's every day. So I'm trying to really understand what are these markets that are going to come in these windows and who are these people going to be and what would they like to experience. And I think so much of it is, you know, this beautiful expressive in the mouth, full but not devastating for some like they want it all. Yeah.
You talked about guano being a major impact on the flavor, and is that like talking about guano being like phosphorus dominant back guano, or are you talking, and what other kind of phosphorus dominant things could affect the flavoring at the late stages?
There's nothing you use that doesn't have an impact. It's just really about trying to battle. What I noticed is, I call it plant obesity, but people try to, because of and this is all from our black market time, right, where we had to get the most out of every plant. So the problem is you're loading this plant up and you're pushing it to a level, and you can because we can keep adding more bacteria, we can keep adding more fungal, we can keep adding more food, and we can push this thing in these aerated pots, and we can create the situation, but the plant is so loaded up that really it's unhealthy, and that's where so many pathogenic problems come from. So when I backed off my food load, my mold problems went away, you know what I'm saying? Like, it disappeared dramatically. All I have to do is increase my scope, you know, open up the scope. And so when you're talking about getting food into cannabis in terms of FOS, as long as I have an adequate amount of bacteria going, I'm going to have uptake on that FOS. It's the hardest one to uptake, but I'm going to get it. I don't want to drive it too heavy. If I go with too much colloidal clay, it's kind of sharp. If I go with too much of fish direction, it leaves a fish tone in the goddamn weed. I go with too much kelp. I'm in the kelp world. So a lot of it is just really which variety of cannabis that you're growing works well with the mix you're using.
So the bacteria dominant, or the culture of bacteria that you're using has a dominant effect on the flavor.
And just with the compost teas, depending on which compost tea I use. So if I use a synergy tea, which is an excellent tea, I use that as a vegetative tea because I got it as a 50 fungal, 50 bacteria, right? So I get a good even mix, and it drives it. But then when I switch in a flowering tea from Green Bicycles, that one has more of like I would say like a limestone flavor. It adds a tone to the cannabis that's sharp, and I dig it. And that's why I use it. I use that product because it adds such a beautiful, it just activates it, but it leaves this really nice, clean, clear. We pulled the top 10 off the Emerald Cup last year off the hill using it. So out of 1,100. And I use the EC a lot because it's just a big competition. But Doug, I own a competition too, and I get a couple hundred samples that come in. EC gets 1,000. So it lets you see a big population. And that's important to say, listen, out of 1,000, this one clearly stood out. And that methodology did it, where back up on the inputs and rely on the genetic form. And my whole thing with guano is I still damn wish I had a bag of it because it used to look like graphite. It used to be, it was different, it was fluffy. And oh, it made pot so awesome. It was like the most wonderful thing ever to come to California and experience guano dope and Humboldt. But those errors are done, and I just really don't want to. I get bats all over my yard, and I look at them and I laugh and say, "You're all right. I'm not stealing your shit." And so you know what I mean? You've got to look at it like that. And the main point is, if your market loves the flavor of your cannabis, you're selling to a store, and the people that are in that store love that stuff, don't change it. That's what you don't break what's not broken. It's just you don't know yet, but you lay out your base mix, lay this stuff out, and let the assertion begin. Is it good? Because you can't detect it until it's done, but it starts to let you go.
Sorry. A quick question. Do you see the future of like cannabis culture areas like viticulture? And we talk about like market demand on regional boundaries like state or areas, but I mean eventually we're going to be able to transport this, you know, across the world.
Oh yeah. We're ready. And if we can survive till then, we'll be all right. But it's trying to survive till then. Like that's the problem. Like I tell people, you got the longest 1,000 days in your life ahead, because the next 1,000 days is going to determine it, because that sets California up, and then we shift in, and then California takes on full production.
Once it's not separated by region, won't that bring in a lot more, I guess, more and larger competition?
More everything.
Yeah.
But what it does though
Now's
is
kind of the time to...
at least it allows you to have historical production zones, and if you can build a brand from that. That's the whole point of Champagne. That Champagne is 4 grapes, common production methodology. So same methodology, but 4 grape choices. So this way they can share anybody's wine with anybody else, because it's not the grape that makes Champagne, it's the secondary process that defines the house. Unlike Burgundy, which is the appellation that defines the Burgundy. So all the Champagne is one group. Burgundy is one group, but each little appellation is what determines what they work with. Here, common grouping. And so if you could set it up to where some of these production zones in these areas had small craft components, but I don't know what the economics are going to be right now, because right now the indoor push is so big. I just talked to a guy the other day, 1 million square foot. I'm serious. I saw pictures of it. I was like, holy shit. I mean, 1 million square foot under light. This is huge. These are multi-state companies. This isn't little. You know what I mean? And so they flew in to talk to me about a project in Humboldt, and we were rapping, and he started showing me, he goes, we're 1 million square foot now. I could not believe the buildings. It was building after building after building after building. It was crazy. But the point of it is that all that occurs, there's going to be some natural, there's going to be a thinning of us. We're not all going to survive. We weren't meant to survive. We were a drug culture of illegal criminals. If you were in business with cannabis, you were an illegal criminal. Because if the cops came over your house, they threw fucking handcuffs on you and locked you up. So we never had any prescribed future. This was rolling the dice the whole damn time. And so all of us that were ballsy and rolled the dice, well, we got to re-roll them one more time. And no, straight up. And this one is, can you clearly separate yourself in cannabis from the commercial entity? How do you define yourself, and how do you get your margin to a level that lets you exist? And how many people have to merge up to do that?
Yeah, it's going to become a commodity sooner or later.
It is.
You need
It's
to
margin.
make sure that you're in the craft,
And
if you want it to small.
Exactly.
Let
So
you
like,
get bought up.
like for me, like my farm, I dropped my farm to 10,000. So I had an ability to be a lot larger farm. I made my farm 10,000 square feet, because it puts me in craft, and I know that I can move all those 10,000 directly through my store vertical without a single hiccup. So I don't worry about it. So why do I want to stress on the farm? So what I recommend to people is diversify what you do. Like, you got to have some more skill sets in the game. When I go to do what I do, I look at it from a bunch of perspectives at once. Because I realized a long time ago I couldn't be a farmer only. Because I knew that, I sat there and I said, okay, I'm going to be a farmer. And I said, oh no, they're going to fuck me. I'm going to be a nursery guy, they're going to fuck me there too. I need to go to stores and distribution. And by the time I was done, I had a friggin' list that looked like a tree. And I realized that if I didn't have the tree, I was going to die. Because every single branch was dependent on the whole. And I didn't have a whole. And so I said, oh Christ. And so this is, just been this relentless pursuit of how to diversify into so many separate businesses. So that no matter what takes place, I'm alive.
One more.
Yeah. That's what I tell people is spread yourself out a little bit, because oh boy, you got a tree coming.
All the way back.
My question is how did you develop? I'm like you. I grew up in the 50s as a trafficker, early 60s. And I guess my question, I'm a newbie. I guess I call myself a newbie now. how do you develop the trust when you was talking about getting with other growers? Because I own 500 acres, 200 here, Carolina, and in Ohio. But how do you develop, get rid of that fear? I guess that fear that the snitch, because you know, like
Totally,
you,
totally. But
I
you
went
know,
behind the wire.
are you good at judging people in general?
I am, but
Then
you know,
that's my, I'm good there.
but also I'm a
But that's what I tell you, is
person.
trust yourself.
Right,
If I
but
don't
you-
feel comfortable with you,
Yeah,
that's
but
going.
you do trust yourself, and I'm a kind-hearted, but when sometime when the feds come and knock on their door, some people's door and say, I'm gonna give you 40 years, I was surprised how my so-called brothers, all of a sudden,
Yeah, but that shouldn't surprise you though, because if you know someone puts a gun to someone's head and says,
Yeah, but-
snitch, they're like, well, that ain't death.
but when you live-
So, yeah, but I know, but like, what you gotta realize though is that you're not in that time period though. You're in another time period
but how
now.
did you get yourself out of that time period? Because
Mentally, I knew I had to.
Yeah.
It doesn't take me a long time to change my mind, where I go, if I don't move my feet, then it'll light me on fire. I'm fucking walking right now. And I'll go. Because I have no time to be burned alive. And what I know is that I trust myself. And anybody that's looking to do quick shit, short-term shit, shady shit, over-profitable shit, you're shiesty. And I won't, I'm from a criminal world, a real criminal world.
Well,
I'll give you help on this one.
I live with the very
Anybody that wants
family
to
up
do
in New
something
York,
shady
so.
has to get you to agree to get in the deal. Nobody honest has ever gotten fucked by a shady person. You had to have went, oh, it sounds too good to be true. I'm going to participate.